In late 2024, the federal election interference case against Donald Trump came to an abrupt end. Before a single juror could be seated, the prosecution was halted and the files were sealed. Immediately, the former president's legal team began a public push to shape the narrative. They sent a letter to the Attorney General demanding the special counsel terminate his final report, asserting that the dismissal represented a complete exoneration. Special counsel Jack Smith went on the record with a different perspective. He clarified that the case was dropped for a specific reason: the Justice Department's policy against prosecuting a sitting president. The dismissal had no relation to the strength of the evidence itself. Testifying before Congress, Smith was direct. He stated that his team had gathered the proof required to secure a conviction. They were prepared to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. While the public was denied a courtroom verdict, the investigative files remain. We can now dissect that evidence to see how a federal prosecutor builds a case against a former president. To secure a conviction, Smith had to clear a specific legal hurdle. Simply proving Donald Trump spoke publicly about voter fraud was not enough. He had to prove mens rea, a defendant's criminal intent. To establish this, prosecutors built a timeline showing Trump received briefings from the DOJ, state officials, and his own campaign advisors, confirming there was no outcome-determinative fraud. These warnings came from the highest levels of the administration. Vice President Mike Pence repeatedly told the president directly that his claims of widespread fraud were not supported by evidence. We know these warnings landed because of how Trump reacted in private. When Pence refused to join the effort to block the certification, Trump berated him for being, quote, too honest. In another instance, he told an aide, quote, "Can you believe I lost to this effing guy?" This layered timeline of private admissions and public claims establishes the specific pattern of behavior the prosecution classified as documented criminal deceit. Criminal intent alone is not a crime. The law also requires physical action. Armed with proof of deceit, Smith's team mapped out a coordinated, three-pronged effort to stop the transfer of power. The first prong was state pressure. The investigation documented the coercion of local officials, demanding they ignore the true vote counts. This included the phone call to Georgia's Secretary of State, where Trump asked him to, quote, find 11,780 votes. When that failed, the effort moved to prong 2, the fake electors. The prosecution compiled evidence showing the orchestration of fraudulent slates of presidential electors across 7 states, intended to introduce conflict into the constitutional certification process. Finally, there was Prong 3. On January 6th, Trump leveraged the energy of an angry mob, sending them to the United States Capitol to physically delay the congressional certification after the previous tactics were exhausted. This 3-step sequence satisfied the action requirement of the federal statutes. The evidence transformed verbal claims into a multi-layered attempt to disrupt the function of the federal government. A rigorous prosecution anticipates the defense's strategy and addresses their arguments directly. Trump's primary defense was that his claims were protected free speech. Smith countered with Supreme Court precedent, arguing that knowingly false statements used to defeat a government function are classified as fraud, which the First Amendment does not protect. The second defense claimed Trump was simply following the advice of his lawyers. The special counsel's evidence argued the opposite. He wasn't seeking genuine legal advice. He was leading an effort, seeking legal cover from co-conspirators to execute a predetermined outcome. Smith's preparation meant the prosecution entered the litigation phase with answers for these defenses, relying on specific evidence to counter each argument. In his final sworn statements to Congress, Jack Smith maintained his stance. He testified that if presented with this exact evidence, he would bring these same charges against any former president, regardless of their political party. He also addressed the speed of his investigation. He testified that the pace was not driven by partisan politics, but by the volume and nature of the evidence his team uncovered. The criminal trial was stopped in its tracks, but the extensive documentation survives. These files now form an immovable historical record. While constitutional policy shielded Donald Trump from a legal conviction in court, Jack Smith's meticulously assembled facts transfer the burden of the final verdict to the American public.